Let's jump into love-hate. Of course, we start with the running backs, and the king starts us off on the love list for running backs. Derrick Henry, Matthew, for you, RB7.
I don't understand the anti-argument for Derrick Henry. I guess it's injury, right? It's injury, but on the other hand, like, he's not human. You, me, Jay, we all have DNA. I don't know what's in Derrick Henry, but it's not the same stuff we're made of. 68 rushing touchdowns in his last 72 games. He now goes to Baltimore. It's going to be the best offensive line he's played with in his career. Since Lamar became the starter in 2019, Baltimore running backs average 4.8 yards per carry. That is the highest in the NFL. Like, just the threat of Lamar just opens up so many lanes. You think about last year when you had Gus Edwards, Keaton Mitchell, the ghost of Melvin Gordon, Justice Hill, like all players that are not nearly as good as Derrick Henry, and they combined for 20 rushing touchdowns and almost 1,700 rushing yards. I'm not saying they all go to Derrick Henry because Hill and Mitchell are still there, and at some point Mitchell will come back. But whatever. If I told you Derrick Henry's getting 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns, you're telling me you're not signing up for that? Of course you are. Stop it. King Henry monster, you're coming.
Yeah, I think that the concern with Henry would be, one, age, two, again, last year was among the league leaders in carries, and just is he going to ever deal with that attrition? And the other thing, the big weakness of the Ravens, or at least the big question mark, is the offensive line, which has a lot of question marks in a way that didn't last year.
Three
At the same
jobs
time,
up for grabs.
Yeah, let's just see him fail. Let's see Derrick Henry fail first, because he succeeds every year. He exceeds expectations every year.
I'll just argue this. Even with the 3 question marks at the Baltimore Ravens offensive line, last year the Titans had the worst offensive line in football. And I don't think it was particularly close.
I trust the Ravens to figure that out.
Yeah, one, you trust them to figure it out, and then two, for Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, that nullifies.
Right, the threat of Lamar solves a lot of offensive line issues. Anyway.
Our next one, Isiah Pacheco. Jay, he comes in as RB8 for Matthew. This is a good offense and a offense where it's pretty clearly defined how narrow the running back volume is in this offense.
Yeah, so he doesn't have any competition. He's clearly trusted in that organization. Isiah Pacheco had 81 carries in 4 playoff games. They clearly want to ride him where they can. And then the other thing is that I think the Chiefs are just going to be a lot better than last year, which is weird to say because they won the Super Bowl, but the offense was stuck in mud for a lot of last season. They're projected to win 12 games. The over-under on DraftKings is 11.5, slightly back to the over. Just think this team is going to be in scoring position a lot. Pacheco he gets all the red zone usage basically out of running backs. Jerick McKinnon is a free agent right now. Pacheco is set for a monster season and also contributes in the passing game.
Yeah, he does. 40 receptions last year. He was one of 11 running backs with at least 200 rushes and over 40 receptions. You mentioned no McKinnon there. 7 games last year without McKinnon, including the playoffs. 19.9 fantasy points per game, over 21 touches a game. He had 18 or more fantasy points in 5 of 7 games. That 19.9 would have been a top 4 fantasy running back over the course of a full season. We agree he's going to be the lead running back for Andy Reid on one of, if not the best offense in football. He's on the short list for ride or die. I'll just tell you that right now. He is on the short list for ride or die. Monster season coming from Isiah Pacheco. I'm at running back 8. He's going at running back 9, but I've also seen him going outside the top 10. His ADP's been rising the last couple of weeks, but as kind of the heat has been rising on Pacheco, but he's an RB1 and he's not being drafted this way.
And we move outside the top 10 for running backs. Joe Mixon comes in as RB12 for you, Matthew, a guy that was kind of thought of as uninspiring at times for the Bengals, but got so much work. Now goes to the Texans, where he will continue to get so much work.
Yeah, I think people think that the Texans offense was much more pass-heavy last year than they were. They were actually much more balanced. The Texans were actually top 12 in the NFL last year in yards per game and running back carries last season. Devin Singletary just got a ton of work down the stretch. And whatever you think of Joe Mixon, he's better than Devin Singletary. And so, Joe Mixon, with not a lot of competition in that backfield, Dameon Pierce, Dario Ogunbowale. This is a guy that last year, again, one of only 5 running backs with 250 rushes and 50 receptions. If you're a defensive coordinator facing the Texans, what am I going to do? Am I going to play, too deep and try to solve for Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell? Or am I going to load the box to stop Joe Mixon? He's going to see a really easy box a lot of the time.
And Jay, this is obviously an offense that there's going to be a lot of opportunity at the goal line. And Hasn't been a great preseason for Dameon Pierce, coming off of a season that was really disappointing as well.
Yeah, he's a very unsexy pick, Joe Mixon, but he just produces in spades. And I think that in this offense, even though he loses Joe Burrow in that offense, the Bengals' offensive line was never magnificent. Still think there's upside for Mixon. Again, not someone you're super excited about, but is bound to produce.
He's one of those guys that when you draft him, no one in your league is gonna like when you draft Malik Neighbors in your draft this year, people go ooh,
or they get pissed at the Giants fans.
That was my guy.
Yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah. No one's gonna be like, damn it, you took Joe Mixon from me, or like, ooh, Joe Mixon. But then you're going to look up and he's going to get 20 touches every game, and he's in the fourth round, which is where he's going on Yahoo, like just massive volume.
It's especially like running back Michael Pittman.
Exactly. If you go receiver early, like Mixon is a very strong RB2 this year.
Right after him at RB13 for Matthew is James Cook. And Jay, I mean, since Joe Brady took over this offense, we saw a totally different James Cook.
Yeah, I mean, he was a monster in the second half of the year. They became more run heavy. It's not like they added a ton in terms of pass catching options. Think back to, if you want to think about James Cook's ceiling, think about the Dallas game where he had 25 carries, 179 yards on the ground. Then he gives you work in the passing game as well. Do you think there's a concern, though, Connor, about Ray Davis and him cutting into Cook's work at all?
I don't think so. I think it's good that Ray Davis looks good, and he was a very effective college back in case Cook gets hurt. But they drafted Cook in the second round. He's supposed to be the guy in the pass game and in the run game, and he's just more explosive. Yep. Ray Davis is I call him the Honda Civic when he was coming out of the draft. Like, you love the reliability, but nothing is sexy about it. James Cook, we know he has the big playability.
Yeah, and you mentioned, when Joe Brady took over, Jay. Once he took over, the Bills were second in running back carries per game. Like, Joe Brady went run heavy, and I think they're going to do the same thing. And so if Ray Davis takes a little bit of work off of Cook to keep him healthy, great, no problem. But Ray Davis, to me, is more of a threat to Ty Johnson than he is to James Cook, who's going to be the focal point of the run offense in Buffalo. Again, one of the better offenses in football.
We moved to one of the most overlooked running backs in fantasy year after year, and that's James Conner. Matthew, for you have him as RB18 on Yahoo ADP right now, going as RB20. And right now, Matthew, when you look at the previous years, all 3 years in Arizona, points per game, James Conner has finished in the top 15. All 3 years.
Again, similar to Joe Mixon, it's just cheap volume. He's not sexy. No one's going to be upset when you draft him. But each of the last 3 seasons, he's one of only 4 running backs. Literally one of only 4 running backs in the NFL with at least 1,000 yards from scrimmage and 8 touchdowns or more each of the past 3 years. Just the consistency. I think this offense is a lot better with the addition of Michael Wilson, a full year of Kyler Murray, the emergence of Trey McBride. I like Michael Wilson, the human Dortch, Greg Dortch. I actually think this offense is underrated. And so James Conner, who should be in scoring position often, 3 down back, just cheap volume going way too late.
Some others receiving votes: Alvin Kamara, RB16, Najee Harris, RB21, Jalen Warren, RB25, Brian Robinson, RB26, Tony Pollard, RB28, Chase Brown, RB29, Tyjae Spears, RB32, Jonathan Brooks, RB34, Ezekiel Elliott, RB36, and his teammate Rico Dowdle, RB40. Jay, who on this list stands out to you, and you cannot say Najee Harris at RB21?
I won't say Najee Harris. I'll say Tony Pollard, who I think might be back based on what he's shown in the preseason, the explosiveness of a few of his runs, and the fact that he was trending up towards the end of last season. I just think it makes sense, the fact that he came back 9 months after breaking his leg. It would make sense that he would need a full year to be back, and everyone thinks that is definitely going to be a 50-50 split. It probably is. There are also worlds where Tony Pollard, who came into last year as like a first-round fantasy pick and a monster, there are worlds where he has that type of season this year if he shows that explosiveness.
All those guys have a lot in common, which is like they're either like it's just cheap volume that you can get late in your draft, like Alvin Kamara. There's just no one there. Jonathan Brooks. Yes, he'll miss a couple of weeks, but Dave Canales, when he was with the Buccaneers, top 10 in running back receiving yards. Brooks. But the one guy I want to shout out real quickly, Brian Robinson. Again, you talk about James Conner. When Cliff Kingsbury was in Arizona, Kenyon Drake, of all people, was second in the NFL in goal-to-go rushing attempts. James Conner was always top 3 in the NFL in goal-to-go rushing attempts. When they're getting close, Cliff likes to run the ball, and it's going to be with Brian Robinson, not Austin Eckler. Eckler's going to be the Chase Edmonds of that offense. Brian Robinson's scoring 12 touchdowns this year. Mark my words.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.